Welcome to the Prepped and Polished podcast, the podcast that empowers you to take control of your education. Featuring weekly interviews with influencers in the world of education, as well as tutoring tips, lessons, and updates. And now, here's your host, Alexis Avila.
Welcome back to the Prepped and Polished podcast. This is your host, Alexis Avila. Make sure to join our community. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, Instagram, YouTube. Type Prepped and Polished, and you will arrive. Also, make sure to go to our site, preppedandpolished.com. You can sign up for our 1-hour SAT Strategies course. It's called SAT Strategy Secrets. It's free. I teach the course, so check it out. Have a question or reaction during or after the podcast? Submit your question to radio@preppedandpolished.com. Let's get to today's guest. Today's guest is Michelle Lederman. Michelle Tillis Lederman is a best-selling author. She's a media expert, keynote speaker, executive trainer, professional coach. She's founder of Executive Essentials, which is a training company that provides communication and leadership programs as well as executive coaching services. Michelle is author of The 11 Laws of Likeability and Heroes Get Hired. She's delivered seminars internationally for Fortune 500 companies, universities, high schools, nonprofits. She's an adjunct professor at NYU Stern School of Business. And Michelle has appeared on NBC, CBS, Fox, hundreds of radio shows across the country, NPR, Martha Stewart Living. She's been quoted in the New York Times, U.S. News, MSNBC, among others. Her books, articles, quizzes, videos have been featured on USA Today, Forbes, and CNBC. Michelle spent 10 years in finance, but beginning her career as a CPA, later joining Prime Media as a mergers and acquisitions analyst. Her experiences range from venture capital to hedge funds, include positions as a financial strategist for Deloitte, consulting. She received her BS from Lehigh University, her MBA from Columbia Business School, coaching certification from the Institute of Professional Empowerment Coaching. On today's episode, Michelle talks about how networking and forming authentic relationships with others is a vital part of success and a philosophy that's especially relevant for teens getting ready for young adulthood and the workforce. Michelle, thanks for coming on the Prepped and Polished podcast. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Not bad, hanging in there. If you can share with us a bit about your background, perhaps focus on a few pivotal life moments that brings you with us today as a best-selling author, a speaker, and founder of Executive Essentials.
Sure. Let's see. Pivotal moments. Well, if I go far back enough, I am a recovering CPA. I actually started my career in finance, and I was the first in my nuclear family to graduate from college. My mother graduated after I did, and I didn't get raised in a family of corporate employees that could relate to the environment that I was going to be entering. So one of the ways that I got where I am is I made a lot of mistakes.
Wow.
And I always say I teach all the mistakes I ever made. So that was a little bit of kind of how I got where I am. I really was very targeted and focused. I wanted a corner office on Wall Street, and I got there. I actually had an office looking out on the stock exchange. So my career evolved from auditing to mergers and acquisitions to hedge fund investing to venture capital to risk management, over the course of a decade. And very frustrated by the communication I was seeing in the management teams, in the organizations. And when I was working on a trading floor as the only woman on the trading floor and managing about $100 million for the bank, and people were coming in trying to get my money, and I'm thinking, no, this is not how you get the money from me. I'm like, this is not how you communicate. This is not how you pitch. I'm like, please let me help you. And that's really where my career started to pivot. And I realized what my calling was and what I was meant to do. And I started doing it on the side while maintaining my finance salary because it's a hard jump to make. And did it for the bank on the side while I still did all my finance work. And it was a great transition. And by the time I had left finance entirely, I was an adjunct at NYU. I was on the faculty of the AMA. I was on the faculty at Rutgers. I already landed JP Morgan, Deutsche Bank, and a myriad of other name brand clients, and I was good to go.
You're good to go. Tell us about Executive Essentials, because, I checked out your site for the last 3 weeks, and it seems like that's really like your cornerstone. So can you talk a little bit about the array of services you provide?
Sure. Executive Essentials is my corporate arm. Okay. I have 4 websites at this point, so life can get confusing, but maybe on the show notes we'll post them all for everybody. But Executive Essentials provides customized communication, leadership, and team building training programs, coaching programs, webinars, blended learning. It really is to service the goals of the organization in whatever channel suits them. Sometimes it's one-on-one, sometimes it's group, and sometimes it's virtual.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's awesome. Now, you speak a lot about the importance not only of networking, but it's important to build authentic, meaningful relationships as key to success. I was wondering, is this a philosophy you've always believed in, or is it something you realized as important later in your career?
I think it's something I learned throughout. I don't think I always understood the value of relationships. And, if I think back to who I was, I'm a child of divorce. So, you grow up with a little bit of a chip on your shoulder and really ready for a fight. And I was the one that I took pride in the fight. So, give me your manager, or I'm going to escalate. That was something that I felt like, well, that made me strong, that I was willing to do those things. And what I realized is that those are not the ways to get what you want effectively. I have really turned the way in which I communicate around. I actually did a talk once at Bendel's in New York City for a group of women. And I told them at the beginning of the talk that I was going to tell them how to never pay a late fee on their credit card again.
Nice.
And it's not by escalating it, and it's not by yelling at people. And it's sad but true that the old trite sayings that you get more bees with honey than with vinegar. That's really the philosophy that has changed the way in which I've interacted, changed the way I've built my business. And the 11 Laws of Likeability, which was my first book, was the answer to the question that people kept asking me of how did I build this business with these name brand clients. And it's that shift in philosophy that real relationships lead to real results.
That's amazing. And you talk a lot about likability. Now, when we say likability, what does that mean to you, and why is it important to be likable?
People would rather do business with someone they like, know, trust, over somebody who's got a better product, over somebody who's got a cheaper product. The relationship wins out, even when things are not equal. And so when you want to think about, how am I getting that next job? How am I getting that interview? How am I getting into that school? The rapport building side of it, the small talk, has a huge impact. It's not just that application, whether it's for college or for the job. You need the entirety of it. So likability is the ability to connect with others in a real way. It is not, and I'm always very clear about this, my book is not about how do I get people to like me. You cannot make people like you, and there will absolutely be people who don't. And it's something that was really hard for me to accept. And it took a long time for me to be okay with the fact that when I do a program, there's going to be somebody in that audience that couldn't stand me. And I've learned that that's okay. But what we can do is understand the drivers of likability, and that's what the book's about, and how we can flex and adapt in our interactions to enable others that we're communicating with to see what's likable about us, rather than, you're going to like me because I'm going to be cheery. That's not going to work.
Right, sure. Now, are most people collectively likable, unlikable, or somewhere in the middle?
I think everybody has the potential to be likable, but I don't think everybody's likable to everybody. And that's okay. One of the things I do teach and I talk about is how do you work productively with people who you don't necessarily like. And likability is not about, hey, let's go get a drink. Likability is about how do we function well in the environment in which we're in. So let's take the fact that when your audience goes to college, they're going to be in teams a lot.
Right.
And sometimes they're going to have a choice about it, and sometimes they're not. How do they work effectively without feeling, put upon and resenting the fact that they're doing more, or they don't agree with a decision, or they just don't like that person? You still have to find a way that you can functionally be productive and have an appreciation for our differences rather than, a disgust for them.
So is it kind of like an attitude shift a little bit? I mean,
I think it is a philosophy. I think it's an approach and a way of thinking. So, I mean, I'm no different than anybody else. There's people that they're just not my cup of tea. And that said, and what I try to teach my kids is treat people with kindness. And it's not fake kindness, it's polite kindness of respect and appreciation. And what I also teach is that you need to look for what you admire and appreciate about someone else.
That's great.
So oftentimes we don't like in others what we don't like in ourselves. And think about that. I will tell you, I realized this was true when I was kind of listening to this girl, and she was loud and she was gesturing all over the place, and it was just, she was annoying and loud. And I was like, oh God, that's me. And I was like, oh man, that's saying so true. So either we don't like in others what we don't like in ourselves, or we don't like in others what we don't understand about them. So because that we think differently, you're a risk taker and I'm risk averse. I don't get that way of thinking. And it's funny because I say to my husband sometimes, like, I don't get it. I don't understand when you know you need to go to the car and you need a key to unlock the car. Why do you wait till you get to the car to look for the key? I have the key in my hand before I leave the house. Like, I don't get it. And he goes, what do you mean you don't get it? You teach this stuff. But we get frustrated by the fact that people don't think the way we think. And instead of being frustrated by it, what I think about is, I'm terrible with details. Oh my God, you're great with them. Love that. They're yours.
Wow.
Right? And I can admire and appreciate and thank you and credit you for all of that work that I don't like to do. And I'll take the pieces that I'm more skilled at. And you can appreciate that for me.
Wow. So I'm sure you have a lot more friends now because you see constantly are just like, looking at the, to learn from other people and what you admire in them. I'm sure you've seen lots of transformations happen where like a rather unlikable person has developed into a more likable person.
It's interesting. People sometimes ask me questions that are a way I don't even think. For example, somebody asked me once about a greatest failure, and I'm like, I don't think in terms of failure. I really struggled with the question. And this is one of those questions for me because I don't see people as being unlikable and moving to likable.
Okay.
I see people as understanding how to flex and adapt to increase connection. So for me, it's not a transformation; it's an adaptation.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, totally, and it's not like so black and white. It's, we're human beings, and we have shades of gray of characteristic. Like it's all over the map. So it's not just like you flip a switch and you're likable.
I want to make a crack about 50 Shades of Grey.
I know, right?
We can edit that one out.
Yeah, that's another conversation, I guess. Now, in one of your books, and it's your popular book, it's The 11 Laws of Likeability. What are a few of those laws that you come to your mind when we think teen listeners can employ? Now, I was thinking before drafting this question that you probably use all 11, but is there like one or two in particular
I guess it depends on what their goals are.
Okay.
When people often ask me what's the most important law of the book, and I always give them two because I can't just pick one. So I can give you what I think are overall the most important. But I do think that which laws we leverage at any given time are depending on the environment that we're in and what we're struggling with and what we're trying to accomplish. But the bigger picture is there's two laws that I think drive everything. And the first is authenticity. It's the first law of the book.
Okay.
And the law there is the real you is the best you. That said, it doesn't give you an excuse to be a jerk. It really is allowing you to appreciate your unique charms. And
Love
that's
that.
what I've decided to call them, because if I sat here and said, all right, I can be brash and I can be loud and I can be a little over the top and I can be a little too intense and I've been told I'm intimidating, and I can give you a laundry list of all these things. And you know what? I have learned to accept the fact that I'm a talker. That's part of my charm. Now, I can tone it down when I see it's not working, but that's who I am, and I'm not going to stop talking. And so the real me is the best me is if I show up to something and I'm a silent person, I'm not bringing me. I can go from talking 90% of the time to 60% of the time, and I'm still me, but I'm moderating it for the comfort of others. And that's kind of what I'm talking about. A flexing is the temporary adjustment of your natural inclination to enable a more effective interaction. It is not, I'm going to change who I am. And so that's the clarity of authenticity, of kind of accepting, your natural inclinations and when they work for you and when they work against you.
That's amazing. And, self-acceptance, and then also it's because what a lot of teens seem to do, and it's been a little while since I've been a teen, but I'm sure they still do it. But if you see somebody who is like the opposite with you, you just make fun of the kid behind his back. And you're just completely rash judging everyone. But what you were saying earlier in the conversation is another quality of being likable is probably looking at people who are not like you in a more, and accepting them a little bit more, looking at their qualities that could help you or whatever.
Yeah, and I'm going to add a third reason why we sometimes don't like people is because we are either jealous of them or afraid of them, and I see that type of behavior and that type of reasoning in the teen environment. I do remember high school, not always fondly, and we've all been picked on. And I used to tell myself, and at least my mother used to tell me, and I chose to believe her. She would say, Michelle, they're just jealous. I'm not sure what she thought they were jealous of, but it was comforting to me. So you got to think about what are the reasons why we're not connecting with somebody, and are they the reasons that are in me, or are they the reasons that are in somebody else? So the first law that is critical is authenticity. In all things that we do, you must bring the real you, because you cannot connect when you're not bringing that. The second that's the most important, and actually I can give a gift to your listeners of this chapter for free. So the law of giving is what I think is the other most critical theory. And so I love to say I give away the chapter of giving. And they can go to my website, which is Michelle Tillis Lederman. You'll spell that for them. It's L-E-D. David Letterman spells it wrong. ERMAN.com. And you can download the chapter there, or you can just go to the website 11 Laws of Likeability, and it's the number 11. And you can download the chapter there as well. But the concept of giving is that giving creates value. And you want to give first, and you want to give often, and you want to give because you can, and you want to give because you want to, and you want to give without expectation of getting something in return. And when you truly give and add value to someone else, that relationship will grow more naturally and will grow with more strength. You're rooting it. And I'm actually looking out a window right now at trees, and I'm thinking about the analogy of rooting a relationship in giving. And what happens naturally is that people want to reciprocate, but they also, appreciate your mindset and your way of thinking, and that you are a giver. And, Adam Grant wrote the book, Give or Take, which, yes, there may be those people, but I think all people can be givers. They just don't always know how or what. And so we also need to remember to be askers. And I have a whole, if your listeners go to my blog, they can find, or my LinkedIn profile, they can find a post, how to ask for what you want, and there's 5 different types of asks, because you have to both be able to give and to receive.
Totally. Now, when I think of today's teens, I think of how they do less face-to-face communication and more texting. So what is good communication etiquette for today's teen?
Oh. You're opening a big can of worms.
It's a big one? All right. Well.
Well, it's a struggle because, each generation we kind of look and it's like, oh, those young kids these days. And you never want to be the old person saying, oh, these young kids, whether it's with their rock music and now with their texting, it's kind of like, God, I don't want to be that person. But at the same time, we have 5 generations in the workplace right now. And although times have changed in the way in which we communicate socially, they haven't necessarily changed the way we communicate professionally. And so we need to be able to communicate through various channels. And when I say channels, what I mean by is face-to-face, phone, video conference, text, instant messaging, conference. Like, there's a lot of different written communication. God, you forgot that one. There's a lot of channels in which we communicate, and you need to be versed in all of them. But texting is probably the least common professionally. And if people are feeling like it's a place to hide and a safe place to communicate from, it's also very disjointed and disconnected. And my personal advice to all professionals, whatever the age, is to vary the channels you choose.
Oh,
and
great.
to look for the most proximate channel you can. And what I mean by that is face-to-face, one-to-one, is your most proximate channel. You have the visual, you have the verbal, and you have the vocal to interpret your message. And then video conferencing. I love Skype. I live on Skype because you can still see the person, you still have the visual, and you can still really connect through that means. So FaceTime and those Google Hangouts are great. I think texting, and I'm a huge email person. I know people move from email to text, but I type better on my computer than I do on my phone. But I do think you need to think about the format of your written communication for being read and received on a mobile device, because that is the way in which we receive information. So a lot of more line breaks and really efficient language is helpful, but don't forego the small talk. And, every 5 times you send a text, send an email. Every 5 times you send an email, make a phone call. Every 5 times you make a phone call, get in person. And it's just a little way to think about making sure that you are getting more proximate with people and building stronger relationships.
That's awesome. Vary the channels. Love it. What are some tips you have for teens getting ready for today's workforce? What are some tips maybe that come to your mind that you have for teens? It's competitive, right? So they probably need a leg up in something. So
I will say that the millennial generation has a reputation right now in the professional environment of being entitled. And I did a whole program on the intergenerational workforce and the values of each generation. I'm Generation X, and what's interesting is Generation X values environment. So we are very green. We're very about recycling and carbon footprints.
Yeah.
The millennial and the Y generation, which kind of have been blended at this point, I think they're separate generations, but they've been spoken of as the same. They are very much about, I don't work to live, I live to work. I'm sorry, I reversed that. I don't live to work, I work to live. And that they believe in results and not face time, and they believe in flexibility and in a mobile workplace. And so they have a very different way of wanting to engage in the workplace that is not necessarily accepted by other generations. So it's a value system that you have to understand is not always shared across the generations. But what I would say is how you show up on day one and the reputation you build in an organization early on is going to make a huge difference. Attitude over aptitude will win you every day of the week.
Love it.
I'm going to say that one again because I want to make sure people got it. Attitude over aptitude. Because I can teach you a skill set, but teaching you a shift in your attitude and how you approach the workplace is a lot harder.
That is awesome. I am writing that down. Now, last time we spoke, you mentioned you have a new book coming out, or it came out probably by now. Now,
it's coming out in September.
In September. Okay. So, did you decide on that title yet?
We did. We landed on Nail the Interview, Land the Job. And for your listeners, it would be Land the Acceptance Letter. Because
yeah.
It could be, although I reference a lot in the job market, a lot of these skills will translate perfectly to the college interview in terms of building rapport and answering difficult questions and, how do you follow up and how do you prepare. I've got actually a checklist in the book of everything you could think about in preparation for the interview.
I love how it's just like a two-pronged approach. It's not just, here's some interview tips, see you later. It's also, let's let this interview lead to something. So that's really helpful. Absolutely.
It takes you from before, during, and after the interview. So once you've gotten the interview scheduled in your calendar, it'll take you from the month out of what do I research and how do I prepare and what should I be doing ahead of time, including thinking about what you're going to wear. It goes into also what to wear. It takes you through the security and the reception area and what do you do and which hand should you be holding things in so that when you get up you can shake a hand more easily, and how do you have small talk and how do you do the opening question and through the entire interview itself, but also what happens when you don't get in or when you don't get the job. How do you actually keep that connection, because you are also, and this is more for the job market than the college market, but you're not just interviewing for the job you're interviewing for, you're interviewing for the job after that.
Wow.
And I will
Whoa.
Yeah. I will tell you that there's times that somebody's like, it wasn't a right fit, but you know what? I'd love to find a spot for you. Or,
nice.
I remember you from interviewing at this company. I'm now over at this company. Are you available? And those things happen.
Oh, that's huge. What do you enjoy most about your work?
I've never really thought about that. I love interacting with the people. So for me, I get a little high when I do a talk, and at the end of the talk, people come up and I get to chat with them, and they tell me about the impact. I actually just got an email today from somebody who had listened to one of my podcasts and asked to, about my coaching services. And then he's like, I can't afford it. And I said, you know what, I'll still give you the half hour. Maybe I can help you in 30 minutes and see what I can do. And so I talked to him for 30 minutes, and I got an email today, and he's like, telling me what steps he took after that 30-minute call. And that's awesome.
That's awesome. And how can we get in touch with you and your services?
I am in a lot of places. So we gave you the Michelle Tillis Lederman website before. Executive Essentials is a .org. My blog is on Michelle Tillis Lederman. I have a YouTube channel. I actually have a vlog now, a video blog. Nice. So if you sign up for my newsletter, you will get a series of 7 emails in the first 2 weeks that will give you 5 success accelerators with videos in each one, and then it will automatically put you into a weekly video blog. Where else can they get a hold of me? Twitter, MT Lederman. On Facebook, it's the professional page. Don't friend me. I'm not letting you see my hair in the 80s. It was really big in the 80s. I have a Michelle Tillis Lederman author and speaker page that you can like, and I'm on there all the time. And you can also find me on LinkedIn.
That's awesome. And to any teens listening to us today, any piece of advice before they cross that bridge to college and young adulthood?
Network.
Nice.
I will tell you, the relationships that you build will last you a lifetime. I got laid off in 2001, and I was working in less than 1 week because of somebody I went to school with.
Wow.
I called up and I said, hey, guess what? I got laid off. And he's like, hey, come work here. And within a week I was.
Perfect. And don't burn bridges.
don't burn bridges, and you get more bees with honey, and we can go on and on and on.
Absolutely. Michelle, before we let you go, is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience?
I always say network for life, not for need and not for now. Build the relationships that you want to, and those are the ones that will sustain you.
Perfect. Well, Michelle, thanks for coming on the Prepped and Polished podcast. Appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And this wraps up our show today with author and coach Michelle Lederman of Executive Essentials. To learn more about Michelle's amazing work teaching others to network better, please check out her site. It's www.michelletillislederman.com. I'm going to spell it for you. MICHELLETILLISLEDERMAN.com. And while you're there, pick up one of her books, Heroes Get Hired, 11 Laws of Likeability. And for another related conversation to today's episode, make sure to go back to episode number 40. It was my interview with Alan Katzman of Social Assurity, where you learn about how to practice safe social media citizenship. And to access this podcast and all of our podcasts, go to preppedandpolished.com/podcast. Make sure to be on the lookout for our next podcast episode. It's going to be number 89. It will be our next tutoring tips episode. Thank you for joining us on the Prepped and Polished podcast. Now go out there and take control of your education.
You've been listening to the Prepped and Polished podcast. For more information, check out preppedandpolished.com. Also, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening. Class dismissed.